just needed something that could actually help build a lifestyle. So I was like, I'll just get back, maybe go back to school for hair. And that's just kind of what I did. I mean, a lot of times it was, it's like, who are you to tell me that I can't do this? So I'm going to show you that I can do it anyway.
You can find that blend of strategy and creation and execute it well, then you can call yourself a creative.
Leading and mentoring is all about having a servant's heart.
Yeah.
You have to have like a genuine desire to help someone else succeed and to help others. And you can't do that if your ego's in the way. Bruce Lee said, don't fear the man that learned 10,000 or 1,000 different kicks. Fear the man that learned one kick and did it 1,000 times. And that's just really what it is. I'm like, if this is something that I struggle with, I'm gonna practice and I'm gonna do this over and over and over until, not till I can get it right, but until I can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, then I'm like, all right, I got
That's the way
to
to do it.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone to the Learning Playground. This is a podcast where I'm going to explore how learning happens in the real world, outside of all the corporate jargon, outside of all the typical constraints that keep us boxed in. This is a place where learning gets messy, it gets creative, but most of all, it gets human. And today, I want to welcome our guest. You can catch him on Instagram by the handle of Who is Zeb. Zeb, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
All right, cool. Thanks for having me. I'm Zeb Ratcliff. I'm actually this guy's big brother, and I'm a hairdresser and a national educator for salons, and I travel all over the country doing classes, hosting seminars, and I've been doing that for almost 20 years now. So exciting to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So you can all see why I was like really excited to have you here, because this is somebody that I've been learning from my entire life, both good and bad stuff. Yeah, you don't need to cry. It's not that serious. Both good and bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
But somebody I've been learning from for many, many years. I want to kind of get started with first digging into like your origin story. So one thing that he left out that I don't know, I'll just bring it up because we're brothers, but before he got into hair, he was actually into music. We were both into music, actually. So
Yeah.
he used to actually produce music, write lyrics, and record tracks. And so curious how you transitioned out of music when that was a goal, like many, many years ago, into hair. When did hair become your thing?
I mean, when it became my thing, I just kind of fell into that. Because even before the music, I don't know if you remember, but when we were in high school and I would cut my hair or cut your hair, we had that little undercut, that chili bowl.
First, hold on, real quick. When he used to cut my hair, though, it was like on purpose.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to do it good, but all right.
Yeah. And so it was just like starting from there, and then, kind of just fell into it, and it became a thing that I would do. Some of our cousins and their kids just cutting their hair on the side and not thinking that I would do it for a living. I've always been into music, and, I was just at that point in my life where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And music was kind of there for us. And, we had the studio in the house and we would just be recording everything. Prior to that, I had went to barber school a few years out of high school because I was like, you know what, I've already been doing this on the side for a few years. Let's just do this. And so I'll just go get a license. So that's what I did. Went to barber school and didn't quite finish. And then just started doing the whole music thing, wanted to be on that side. And after a few years, I was like, well, this ain't making me any money, because not saying we weren't good at it or anything, but I mean, come on, we had this little like home studio microphone in the closet, kind of thing.
It worked.
Yeah, it worked. And just needed something that could actually help build a lifestyle. So I was like, I'll just get back, maybe go back to school for hair. And that's just kind of what I did. And brought me to where I am today. So, I mean, there's a whole nother story behind that. I just don't know how much you want to get into it,
No, let's get into it. But before we do, so like one of the things that about like probably like similar story for me, like I didn't really know like what I wanted to do getting out of high school, even getting into college and doing all that stuff. But I actually had started my career in banking, and I honestly say I hated every day of it, but it kind of, it led me to where I am today. But along that path, I found like people who influence me without me knowing that they were influencing me in a way towards like my where I'm at right now with my career. So I would like follow designers like Disney, like Walt Disney is somebody like obviously a long time ago, but I followed his story, followed his work. And even people like I would get inspiration from people like Albert Einstein just because he like just completely reinvented like certain laws of physics and things. I don't want to geek out
Yeah.
into this stuff, but what I do know about you is like you have a tattoo on your arm.
Yeah.
It's a the face of a woman.
Yeah.
So obviously there's some story there. There's some
Yeah.
inspiration that
Yeah.
comes from that person.
Yeah, I just happened to meet her one time,
Yeah.
it's a one night stand and got her face tatted. Nah, actually it's a model from the 60s named Nancy Kwan and Vidal Sassoon, who is a renowned hairdresser at that time from the UK, ended up chopping all her hair off into this like iconic bob. And it kind of revolutionized the way that hairdressers and barbers cut hair nowadays. And he kind of revolutionized how we did how a salon operates, two big windows you can see in and things like that. And so I just felt like it was an homage to like get this tattoo towards someone that I felt like was so legendary in the industry. And it just kind of motivates me to continue to do it because I was like, if you have this poor kid in the UK, grew up with nothing, that could come out and just be this big known name in the industry and he can do it and he can make it, then anybody could do it, and so I end up getting that tattoo. It's crazy though, because speaking of tattoos, like a lot of hairdressers and barbers, when they first start out, they want to get like the scissor tattoo or the clipper tattoo, and I was like, I'm not doing that, man. Like I was like, I want something that indicates something and has some sort of significance, and that was probably one of the best things. However, people who don't know, they automatically assume, is that your girlfriend? Is that your wife? It's like, nah, it's not. It's neither one of them, and it's hard to explain it to people who aren't in the industry because they don't really know who that person is, but that's kind of where it is.
I thought it was like one night stand or somebody I didn't know. So it's a good story. So all good.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things that like I've over the years come to love about you, but when we were kids, I hated about you because it just annoyed me, was that you always kind of did things against the grain. You were like,
Hmm.
if somebody told you to do something a certain way, you would always do it differently. And
Yeah.
oftentimes I felt like it was out of spite, just to see if you can prove them wrong.
I mean, a lot of times it was,
Yeah.
it's like, who are you to tell me that I can't do this? So I'm going to show you that I can do it anyway. It laid a lot of foundation for what I do today, but now I have a more of an adult mentality
Yeah.
that it's live life a little bit more so than then, that I have a better understanding. And now it's not out of spite. But
Yeah, so I'm curious, like, how that plays like, well, so this is a lesson for me. It's something I learned, like, later on in life, like, now reflecting back on that, was that, by just becoming, like, the yes person,
mhm.
which I was honestly through high school and, like, just, like, growing up because I just was trying to assimilate into situations where it was just, like, less conflict, the better. But now as I get older, we're in our careers, I'm in the workplace, and I realized that just by doing that, you get passed up on opportunities.
Right, right.
So I had to learn really quickly how to assimilate again, how to adapt to become kind of the alter ego of what I was, which is basically the person that you were growing up, which is
Mhm.
like not doing it out of spite, but just like, just because that's the way it's being asked about me, um, or that's what's being asked from me, what's another way to do this? Like, is that the right way? Continue to
Mhm.
question everything to a point where sometimes people probably get annoyed by me because I
Yeah.
question so much. But the reality is, it's coming from a good place. So I want to do what's best for like whoever the end user or customer is,
Yeah.
for what I'm building. But curious, like now, carrying that because I know who you are and I know that that's still kind of true. You still like to do things your own way. You run your business your own way. And we talk about this all the time, just like how you think about different operating models and what's going to work best for you. But like, who are people now, current day in the industry, that you look to to continue to like motivate you to keep thinking that way?
In the industry, it's funny because, and I think a lot of the world is like this right now. It's like people don't praise the accolades anymore. Like back in the day before social media, it's all about the awards you had and the things that you did, magazine shoots and covers. And I've done a lot of this type of stuff and video shoots, but it didn't translate into the public eye the way it does now because of social media. So you can build a following. A lot of social influencers are building following just by the amount of posts that they do and showing off their work. So there are some like social media influencers in our industry that I do look up to or see, and a lot of them are other salon owners and that been doing this for a while, or educators. But I still go back to the people that were at the top of that game prior to social media when I was coming into the industry. And then so you're still looking at some of them. So I mean, Vidal Sassoon has always been an inspiration. He passed like probably about 10 or years ago or so. And but there's a lot of other big names out there. You know, you have like a DJ Muldoon and Ira Sage, and you have John Paul DeJoria, who is the co-founder of Paul Mitchell Systems and things like that. But I feel like sometimes I don't just draw inspiration from well-known people. I draw inspiration from people that are taking small strides to hit that success.
Yeah.
Because I think anyone can be considered a successful person. They just may not be that level of success that someone might deem successful. For instance, the alcoholic that decides they want to stop drinking,
Yeah.
or anyone that wants to stop drinking, and then they're able to do it, regardless of how often, whatever that time period is, that's a success right there. And they're successful. The rest of their life might be in shambles, but, and they might gamble their money away or whoever it is, but they had success in changing their lives in that. And so sometimes as inspiration, it's not just about the big name people out there. It's sometimes some of my peers, it's like I draw inspiration from the youth that is actually eager and hungry and out there to grow, because we don't see that a lot nowadays, man. Like, we had to like really work to get to where we are. And a lot of I feel it's easier with social media, but because you can market yourself differently and you can be successful. The thing that makes it hard though is there's so many options now that if you don't catch them in like that instant, then you don't get the engagement. And so sometimes that attention span is really low. I mean, I guess I kind of digress from the actual question. I do draw inspiration from quite a few people, but I look at people that have successful salons or successful education careers or successful educational programs or courses. And I draw inspiration from that and say, okay, even though I want to go against the grain, I say there's a formula to what they're doing. How can I do something similar, but make it me? And that's the most important part. Like some of this stuff I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel by any means. So it's just like, I'm going to take what you're doing, but I'm going to make it fit me, because I'm not trying to be a beige mom out here or nothing. You heard of what a beige mom is?
I don't know what that is.
Beige mom is like the trend nowadays where all the moms are decorating their homes the same, all the beige tones and beige aesthetic, It's just like a trend you'll find on TikTok. It's just like I'm trying to still make it true to my core principles and my core values and what I stand for,
And that's probably one of the more critical lessons I learned probably within the past 5 years, I'd say. I was working with this designer, and he's at the top of his game. He's a multimedia designer, does a lot of brand stuff. And we were talking about creativity and inspiration and just a very similar topic. Like what hit me was when he told me like his realization that like creativity isn't like how we typically think about like the chaotic like creator. It's somebody that actually follows like a process and follows those incremental steps. And he found his inspiration through very similar people taking those tiny steps towards like creating something that is both strategic but also creative. And if you can find that blend of strategy and creation and execute it well, then you can call yourself a creator, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. Because really, I mean, art, even like you think about film, you think about art, it all follows a process. It all follows fundamentals. It all follows like incremental steps to get people to where they are, and then they brand it as their own, like they make it their own.
Right. And it's subjective too. So what we might see as great art, someone else might not see, and it's like that in our industry, in the beauty industry too. It's like beauty is subjective. So what I might see that I think looks good, someone else might think's the worst thing ever. And so we have to kind of meet there in the middle. And I often tell people that sometimes simplicity is the most creative things that we can do.
Yeah. All right. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about education, because you do a lot of education in your work
Yes.
outside of
Yep.
your salon. When did you realize that teaching was going to become part of your career?
Probably when I was teaching you how to shoot a basketball. No, I'm kidding. Uh, no, honestly, man, I didn't even think that was a thing to do. I didn't know the education was a route that you can go in our industry. It was actually a mentor of mine, and it's somebody that owned the school that I went to and I worked for straight out of school. She seen it in me and she was like, "You ever thought about being an educator? I feel like you could do that." And I'm like, No, I don't know. What do you mean by that?" And she was like, "Well, you go out there and you teach people new things in our industry." And I'm like, "No, I never thought about it." And I think a lot of it happened because I went to barber school first, and I had already been doing those barber style haircuts prior to school for so many years. And when I decided to go to beauty school, it was actually because barber school would not let me re-enroll. They said the school that I went to was like, "We don't accept re-enrollments." I think really they were just like, "Nah, bro, we don't want you back," you know? But honestly, they were like, "We don't accept re-enrollments, and you'd have to forfeit all the hours that you did do in order to come back if we let you, on top of like making an appeal to the board." And I'm like, I'm not doing all that, man, and if I'm gonna lose all my hours and I have to start all over, then I might as well go somewhere else. And in Houston, that's where, obviously we're from, and that's where I was like, there's got to be other barber schools. So I went, and then they're like, "Well, you already have registered hours for the state, so you're a transfer student. We don't accept transfer students." So at that time, I was just like, dang, like, if I can't get back in this, then what do I do? And then I was like, you know what? I'll go to beauty school because I already know how to do men's hair. I'll just go learn to do women. And then I was like, and I get to meet women. I was like, it's a win-win for me, bro. But as time went on, it became less about women and money. And because honestly, I met my baby mama in beauty school. And so that put an end to that. But just to like get back on the topic of education, is like when I got to beauty school, they knew that I was already doing that type of stuff. And so a lot of the students would come to me for help on how to do these men's haircuts because the instructors weren't really giving them that barber aspect of it because they were in cosmetology, which are two different fields. And that's where she noticed it. She's like, "You're really good with them, and you do really great work. And you ever thought about education?" So from there, while I was in school, she got me connected with other school owners, and they would invite me to do guest artist positions. It was all free. It wasn't paid for. And I would just show up to their schools and I would do a class for the students. And I just did it on barbering, men's haircuts and fades and how to connect the two. And that just kind of got me my start from there. And at the time, like I would go to other schools in Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, and I would travel already while I was in school for those type of things. But then when I got out, she was like really working with me hardcore on like building my presentation skills and building my communication, and then helped me get my foot in the door to start working for a brand. And I had to do an audition, and then that was just all she wrote. And from there, now I do it all the time. And I think like this year alone, I did like 62 classes
Wow.
for the year. So, and I get to
Sweet.
travel and do all that stuff. So she was a very big, not just inspiration, but mentor that guided me towards that education. So again, I didn't know that was an option, but like there's just so much opportunity. I call it like the tree of opportunity, right? Each branch has a different opportunity that leads you somewhere, and education just happened to be one of them. And I'm like super passionate about it and I love it. And that's just kind of where it was, like it kind of led me from there.
That's some good insight, because like for those in my field, like I'm on LinkedIn a lot, not necessarily like posting and things like that, but just like listening and hearing about people that are transitioning from like being a classroom educator to wanting
Hmm.
to be in learning design and not knowing how to get in that field. And what I heard from your story was like lean into your strength. Like your strength at the time was was bartering because you had already had that skill set, and that's something that everyone around you didn't have. And like in my story, it was graphic design. Like I wasn't a learning designer to start. I was like a multimedia designer, and I leaned heavily into like my programming or coding background,
Right.
building websites and UX design and graphic design. And then when you're in, it sounded like you found a mentor, you surrounded yourself with the people that can help you grow, and then you just put in the work.
Yeah. No, seriously, man, because that's really what it's about. What they say, if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yep.
So it's like I never followed people who couldn't lead me better than I can lead myself. And so I think a true leader can lead you better than you lead yourself. And you just have to have the vulnerability to allow yourself to be led.
Yeah.
And I saw that in this person and I was able to do it. And I think, going back to when we were kids, why I probably went against the grain for some, like arguing with the teachers or, all that type of stuff, is mainly because I didn't see them as that for me. I'm pretty insightful that I was just like, I can do this myself or do that, whatever. But then when I really saw someone that's like, dang, the life they have, the things that they want, how they got to where they are, I want that. So then I'm gonna lean into it, and I think it's really important for people to do, just kind of surround yourself by those people that can help you.
I mean, it's really important. And that's really what got me through, just being able to lean into that skill. And like it's really kind of poor advice, but it's the reality of the situation. Sometimes you just gotta, like, in my case, it was like the first year was like fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah,
Lean
yeah,
into your skill, really promote that skill, but then be willing to do the work. Don't just settle like I'm like better than my peers at this particular thing,
right.
because like in 3 months they could catch up and
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
obsolete.
well, ego will never get you as far as passion will. And so it's like people say fake it till you make it, but I say fake it till you become it. Hey, not, but seriously, because like if you fake it and then you make it,
Yeah,
but then it's like, what now?
yeah,
But if you're faking it till you actually become that you were trying to fake to be, then you become it and you already know how to live it,
yeah,
and it's just like, if I wanted this, I got to become that. I
yeah,
can't just make it there. I have to become this person so that way I can continue to do that,
yeah, and be willing to put yourself in
Yeah.
those uncomfortable
I mean,
situations.
because you have to, leading and mentoring is all about having a servant's heart.
Yeah,
You have to have like a genuine desire to um, help someone else succeed and to help others. And you can't do that if your ego's in the way,
yeah,
and that's what it really, the hairdressing, with all jokes aside about, oh, meeting women and making money, all this, like, oh, that's just joking around fun stuff. But at the end of the day, it became more about helping others, whether it's people that are in my chair or helping other students or other hairdressers like succeed and learn and grow. That's what it became about. And that's probably the biggest inspiration that I can find is from those people that have that desire to learn, because I have the desire to help you,
yeah.
you know, learn that information and give you that information.
That's deep.
Yeah, bro, we dropping knowledge today, bro. They they call me Zeb, aka Knowledge Ratcliff. Nah,
It came over
that's
better.
that's my music days. I want to grab a mic and
We're gonna cut that, and you're gonna think of something better, and we're gonna plug that in.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So now I want to transition a bit into your salon environment. So you have a lot of people that come in. You probably, I don't know, how many people do you meet with per day?
Per day, it can be anywhere from 12 to 24.
Dang. Okay. So
Yeah. I think average is probably about 15 people a day.
all right. So is this like fluid environment? You're meeting,
Mm.
or probably like obviously a lot of returning clients, but a lot of people in and out. Tell us about one thing you do to educate your clients that maybe they wouldn't see as like a typical like uh lesson or education thing. Like
Mhm.
maybe they're learning without knowing that they're being taught.
Well, one of the things I do for that is maybe when it comes to styling their hair, that's probably the easiest way to teach them something without realizing it, is basically, as I'm using the product, I tell them how I'm using it. Hey, I'm gonna put 3 pumps of this spray. I'm gonna spray 3 pumps right along your hairline. I'm gonna spray 3 pumps along here, and that's gonna help for XYZ. Now, they are hearing me telling them what the product's doing for them, but also they don't realize that when they go home, they're gonna be like, "Oh, wait, he did 3 pumps, so that's what I should be doing," you know? Or how I manipulate the iron work or the hot tools at what angles and what directions, and I'm just explaining it to them. They don't realize it's a learning moment, they just think it's me educating them. But in our industry, you kind of have to sell yourself and sell what you do. But I often tell people, if you feel like you're selling it, then you're doing it wrong. Because the goal isn't to sell, it's to educate. And that education is what leads them to recreate what you did at home. And that's going to lead to their retention, to them
Mm.
coming back. Because if they can't do it at home, then they're going to go somewhere else because they're going to feel like they can't get their hair. So it's not really about they don't know that they're learning. They know, but it doesn't feel like it in that moment, and
Yeah.
it doesn't feel salesy to them.
Authentic, and you're
Right.
genuinely doing what's best for,
Yeah.
like, I guess in our field, it would be like building an experience that's more like human-centered or learner-centered and less about like all the metrics and everything. Those will come if you're building for the person, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you have to do it in a way that makes them feel like you understand them and you're putting in a way that they can understand. And that's really what it's about. It's like, are we understanding each other? And a lot of that starts like in the consultation. Like you you get your hair cut, by someone else because I'm not in town, right? And when I come to town, I cut your hair. But when you sit down, do they ask you questions about your hair and
Well,
what you're looking for? Or like,
because I know my barber's watching this, I'm gonna give him a shout out. Yes, he's actually really good.
yeah,
So
yeah.
but it took me many different people to
Right.
go through like 5 years of bouncing around barbers to find the right one.
So you
You
would
know,
sit, let's say, in someone that wasn't that great, not your barber today. Shout out to your barber. What's his name?
Danny.
Danny. All right, shout him out. Danny, the barber. I don't know what his IG handle is, but let's say you went somewhere and you sat down and it's not Danny, and they ask you questions or not ask you questions. What was something that happened when you sat down before they even started that you felt some sort of regret, like, dang, I should probably not do this? What would you
Yeah.
say that would be?
Like right away, they cut it too short, right?
Yeah,
They didn't ask like, "Are you sure you want to go this route? Because maybe like it doesn't fit the shape of your face or something." I mean, these are
right.
things like a normal person is not in the industry like me would never even thought about. I probably think about it more because I have a brother that does this.
Yeah,
Like without that, like yeah, sometimes I'll get my hair cut and I'm like, I think I've even gone to you and be like, "Oh, I want," like, this is when faux hawks were in.
yeah,
"I want a faux hawk," and you'd be like, "Oh, that's not gonna like,
yeah.
be good for the shape of your head,"
No,
you know?
yep.
But at least there's the honesty, but, like, situations like that where people are just, like, being the yes person and saying, "Yes, I'll give you what you want," and then the end result is, I don't
And that happens a lot. A lot of people don't know. We get taught in school right away, like what questions to ask, but we're not taught how to respond to their answers. And they're like, okay, yeah, I got you. Or say less, fam,
yeah.
and then you end up having a pineapple top, the little hair that's sticking out on
Lego
top.
man haircut.
Yeah, get the Lego helmet, it just looks like someone just put it on there. But like the consultation is really where it starts because it's about understanding them. And I tell this to even the youngest hairdressers that are new to the industry or anybody. And it's like, sometimes it's not really about knowing how to create something for them. It's listening to them and then just finding a solution to their challenges. So a lot of times I say, if you want to look like someone that knows what they're doing, use the word because, and then paraphrase what they said. So for instance, because you said your haircut was too short last time, we're going to leave it on the longer side today. Because you said your color fades quickly, we're going to use something that's going to help to increase the longevity of your
Mhm.
hair color. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to be just yet, but now I have to like execute that and follow through. But that little segment is like, oh dang, like Zeb understands me. He's listening. I'm in the right spot. The next thing you know, they're sitting up and they're like happy and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, and they're all excited about it. And that's where it starts, is making that initial connection with them to get that understanding. And then they're open to what you have to say, which means they're going to be open to learning because now we're giving them the information that they want. And I say that's probably the part that they don't realize, that they're learning something new, because we're actually listening to them
Mhm.
and then we're responding with solutions to what their challenges are.
Yeah. Have you ever run across a client that you've gone through this whole experience, you listened to them, you got the
Mhm.
verbatims, you used it because you said so, and they still didn't, like, maybe halfway through the process, it just kinda went sideways. And
Um,
how do you handle that?
yeah, I mean, that happens to everybody, even to this day. I would say, well, first, let's talk about how that happens, and then I can give like a scenario because there's a couple things that can happen. One is there it went sideways because maybe they weren't honest about their hair history.
Mhm.
And then next thing you know, that comes to light while I'm doing something, especially with color, you know?
Yeah.
With hair cutting, it'd be more or less, they realized maybe they told me to go shorter than what they wanted. And I've had that happen before. One guy afterward, he's like, this a little too short. And I'm like, hey man, I'm sorry. It was that we talked about it, you know? He's like, I know this is my fault, you know? And some of them will acknowledge that. And then, or some will be like, oh, not too short. So that's where consultation is really important because you have to make sure you're on the same page and then you have to confirm it back to them. Okay, just to confirm or to recap, we talked about XYZ and this is how we're going to execute it and da da da. And then they can agree to it. If you're not on the same page, then that happens. Most of the time, mistakes or people being unhappy are because there is a miscommunication and you're not on the same page. It's hardly ever quality.
Yeah.
But I would say first and foremost, like one of the times that happened is that haircut and go through the whole spiel of like, what are you looking for? You know, what's your goal? And then talk to them about it. And then, all right, because you said this is what we're going to do and da da da. And then in the end, they're like, it's too short or something.
Yeah.
And so what I would do in that situation is I would apologize in a sense, unless I know I didn't do anything wrong. Then you got to kind of read the person. Some people look for an apology because they want to know that you messed up. So it just kind of depends. But sometimes I'll just apologize to them for what happened, and then I'll find a solution. Well, if it's a little short this time, why don't we push your next appointment out a week or two to give it some time to grow? I'll make note of it. And then that way, when you come in next time, then we can regroup.
Yeah.
And then also give them homework like, hey, find a photo of what your inspiration is, and then we'll try to execute that next time.
Yeah, so that you kinda touched on it a little bit, but my next question was gonna be around adaptability, like, in
Hmm.
moments like that where, okay, like, regardless of, like, what they said, what they didn't say, how do you adapt in those situations and so that they leave that experience feeling like with a positive feeling?
You have to know how to pivot, and not everybody knows how to do that. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges when educating someone is teaching them how to pivot and how to move from that to adapt. And that comes with experience and that comes with knowledge.
Yeah.
Because when I first was doing hair, I didn't have that. That took some years to gain. But it's really like actively listening to them. And active listening is more like listening to what they're telling you without deciding what you're going to say next. Because if you're listening to your own voice, then you're not really listening to them because you're listening to yours. And so I have to really listen to what they're telling me and then immediately find a solution. It's much like a quarterback for a football game. He'll notice something, he'll read something in the defense, and he has to call an audible. The coach don't tell him to call the audible. He decides to do it, right? It's like we got to change this play immediately, and then everybody else on the team has to know what that play is when he calls it out. And that's how it is, not just in our industry, but in life.
Mm.
But that doesn't come with the knowledge. The first year quarterback may not necessarily know like how to call the audible, or they're going to call the wrong thing and it's going to cost them, but then it's a learning opportunity. So if I was to pivot in that moment and I see that they're still unhappy, then all I can do is reflect, and I can either beat myself up and be like, oh, bro, you suck, Zeb. Like, why are you doing this? Or I can say, okay, what can I take from that and what can I do differently? So next time I have that situation and it's very familiar, I can say, okay, this is what we would do next time. And not too many people are catching that or they're open to that learning. I think because a lot of days right now, especially, is people just see the outcome because that's what's being posted,
Right.
and you don't really see the work it took to get there or the years of experience it took. And so they're just like, well, if I don't get it right, then whatever. I'm not going to do that again. I'm just going to the next one, or they hate themselves, or they want to switch without being open to say, okay, what can I learn from this?
Yeah. That's such an important lesson. And um, to your point, something that very many people get wrong. They're not treating each like experience like a learning moment for themselves, right? And so,
Right.
um, and that's something that like a lot of people. I'm very thankful to work with a lot of like amazing people that are like listeners first before, and they just kind of adapt the experiences based on what they're hearing. They're continuing to learn and continuing to hone their skill. So I think that's an important goal. But I did want to call out your football reference. We were talking about this earlier.
Omaha 30.
Yeah, I feel like this is his own. That was his only football reference. He doesn't even watch football. Nah,
Actually, your wife, my sister-in-law, we're not gonna put their name on camera unless they want it, but she was like, "Hey, do you watch football?" And I was like, sometimes, but I catch more highlights." She's like, "Oh, could you have a conversation about stats?" I'm like, "Nah, but I'll make it look like I do," because I was like, "Nah, I don't know who none of these people are nowadays." But when you're doing like, if I taught 62 classes this year, I don't really have time to sit there and watch a football game,
Yeah.
more or less. But
Yeah, I'm the same way. I just listen to this. I watch this, read the stats so I can be conversational. But
yeah,
to be
yeah.
honest with you, I don't really care about football too much. But you were talking about like the time it takes to like learn your craft, learn your
Mhm.
techniques. Curious about something like a technique or an approach that you've developed over years that if you could kind of talk us through like maybe one of those and like what it took for you to really like refine that until you're like, okay, this is like the way that I'm going to approach my work moving forward.
I guess my approach is more, I like simple, I like not necessarily easy, because sometimes the simplest things aren't the easiest things to do, but I'm more about the fundamentals. Like, what's the simplest way I can break this down to get the result without being too complicated? And so that's the way I look at it. And if I start overthinking what I'm trying to do to get that result, then my approach is like, okay, scratch that. I need to simplest version. How do we do that? Um, and that's really my approach, is like, what's the simplest way to get from point A to point B that is efficient and effective, like
Yeah.
cost effective too, right? Because even though they don't want to spend a lot of money, but you don't want to undercharge yourself either for what your value is. So I'm like, how do I make this efficient? And efficiency becomes like doing it over and over. It's like Bruce Lee said, don't fear the man that learned 10,000 or 1,000 different kicks. Fear the man that learned one kick and did it 1,000 times,
Yeah.
And that's just really what it is. I'm like, if this is something that I struggle with, I'm going to practice and I'm going to do this over and over and over until, not till I can get it right, but until I can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, then I'm like, all right, I got
That's
this
the way to
now.
do it.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I'll just practice on you first.
1,000 times.
1,000 times, 1,000 haircuts.
So let's switch into like out of the salon and into your education role.
Mm,
So you work for Wella Professionals as
I
like as
do.
an educator. So we were talking about this yesterday. You mentioned that like there are times, and I mean I think this is within any role. Same thing happens to me. Like there are times you walk into a place and you're looking to, like you're the educator in that moment, right?
Hmm.
But there are times where people that are the learners are challenging you,
Right.
and so like in my environment, there could be times where I'm sitting in a strategy meeting with other learning professionals and I that maybe I have or haven't worked with in the past, and I propose an approach, right? Like this
Hmm.
could be an approach based off everything that we've heard from the learner. This might be the best approach to get us to that business outcome. And there are times where people challenge you, right? And so in that moment, you could either like close up like a clam,
Right.
or you can just like kind of stand your ground and really explain yourself. How do you go about approaching a situation like that? Especially you,
Yeah.
you've taught over 60,000 and six or 60,000, over 60 different salons across the US this year, right? So
Hmm.
you're going into new places all the time, people you
Right.
don't really know. How do you handle a situation where you're being challenged possibly about your approach
Yeah.
and like give us a little bit of insight around that?
When I have somebody that is presenting a challenge in class, I I try not to focus on them so much. I I just redirect the conversation. I'll ask them, let's say for instance, because there's two type of people that are going to present challenges for us intentionally. There's going to be the one that thinks they know it all because maybe they just feel they know it all, or because they've been doing it longer than you. And then you have the one that wants to test your knowledge to see if you're the person that they should be learning from. And they're going to test you and test you and test you to see if they can stump you. And those two people. And so if it's the person that thinks they know it all, or thinks they, because they've been doing it longer, I invite them up to the front and say, oh yeah, well, show me that one then. Show me the way you were doing it, and let's see that. And then I'll praise them a little bit on it, or they'll meet it and they'll come up and they'll do it, or I ask them to, hey, why don't you show us what I was just doing? Let's have you do it for the class. And either they're going to accept that challenge or they're going to deny it. If they accept it, great, because now they have to show that they are great at it. And if they are, then perfect. Hey, that was a great job, everyone. Don't you guys think? Awesome. Thank you for your participation. Now sit your ass back down. No, now sit back down. No, but if they deny it, then it already kind of keeps them quiet because they're like, all right, he's just going to ask me to do this again. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I handle the situation with the people that know it all. Just put them in the forefront and let's see what they do, and give them praise and give them a chance to shine because maybe that's what they want, or give them a chance to deny because they don't want that. You know,
Yeah.
if it's the person that's testing you because they just want to see if they can stump you or they have the knowledge, then I just answer them back with a question.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what would you do in this situation? And then they would tell me. I'm like, all right. I mean, has that worked for you in the past? Awesome. Then I would say if it's working for you, then continue to do it. Do what makes sense. However, this is just another way for people that may not want to follow that path to get to that result.
Yeah.
This is how we would do it. And then I just move on from it because it's like the bad kid in school. If the teacher's like focusing on the bad kid the whole time, the good kids no longer want to learn from them,
Yeah.
but if she's like, all right, whatever, we're just going to let you be you and we're going to focus on the good kids, then eventually that kid's going to be like, you know what? Everyone else is learning and I'm not. So maybe I'll just follow suit and start to do things. And that's just kind of how I approach that for the most part.
Yeah, the point you made about like what's working for you, if it's working great, keep doing it. It kind of made me think. So like my entire it's not really a philosophy, but the way I kind of approach learning design is that this is a way, it's not the way. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of different ways to approach the problem.
Right.
And so in those moments, just don't you can't like to your point, you can't take it personal. It's not about you personally. It's like they're trying to fill you out to either decide
Mhm.
whether or not like what you're proposing
Yeah.
is rooted in something like
No, it is.
fundamental, or if like it's like in my case, is it rooted in science, or is it rooted in like grounded technique, for
Mhm.
you? And it's less really about like attacking you as a person. So this is something that took me a long time to really wrap my head around because it always felt like a personal attack.
Yeah.
But as soon as I switched my mindset of just like this has never been about me. This is about this person also wanting to do what's best for the learner,
Yeah.
and they're questioning my approach because maybe it's something new to them,
Mhm.
and they haven't seen it done before, or they're trying to see whether or not like I'm actually
Yeah.
bringing something to the table. And both I invite because then it's a lesson for me to learn of like how can I better communicate that.
A lot of times too, there's a underlying insecurity in those people,
Yeah, yeah,
because we said something that might make them feel like they don't really know what they're doing. So I'm going to tell you, this is how I do it because that's what works. And what do you know? But also sometimes I see myself in that because like I said earlier, is like, I tend to I'm okay with following the lead of someone that I feel can lead me better than I lead myself. And in that instance, they're like, should I be following what this person is telling me? I don't really know yet because I think I can do better. And it's like, okay, well then show me you can do better, and then let's do it. And if that works out, then that's awesome. And then once you also too, as a facilitator and educator, once you acknowledge that person's perspective, they actually open up more
Right.
to what you have to say versus the educator facilitator is like, yeah, no, that's not going to work.
Right.
That's wrong. Because honestly, we have the concept of wrong and right in life, but there's really no right or wrong when it comes to the way you do things or decision making. There's just the way we do it. There's a better way or a not so better way. And sometimes, we just make the wrong decision and it's not really wrong because we learn from it. It's just a discovery more than a mistake. And so it's like, maybe that's just where they're at with it. It's like, what can I do differently?
What I realize is that like everyone's experience to get up to that moment of that conversation is
Mhm.
different too. Like you've had different mentors or maybe the opportunity to have mentors where somebody else may not have. So you're
Yeah.
more open to like this type of change. So I had a mentor that told me early in my career that the biggest trap that you can fall into is teaching the way you've been taught,
Mhm.
right? Because like we grew up in kind of like, not to age us, but like we weren't like digital natives. Like that internet kind of came out when we were already
Yeah.
like in high school or
I
whatever.
mean, but I vibe with the youth, so
Yeah, well, you do. I don't. My gray hair will say it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like just be that's my truth. So like a lot of times, like in my field, people find themselves creating experiences and teaching the way that they've always been taught. And it's
Mhm.
always like, let's create an in-person workshop where it's just lecture style. We don't really give time for
Yeah.
people to actually get hands-on, or let's create an e-learning module for 30 minutes and make them sit in front of a computer because that's how I learned how to do something, and it worked. But it doesn't work that way for everyone,
Right.
right? And then the other thing is like the way we consume content now is so different than it was even like a year or two, like even a
Yeah.
year ago. So curious, like when you go into these classrooms, how do you think about tailoring that experience to like each individual person in that classroom? Because like I would assume you go into a salon, there's probably like junior stylists
Mhm.
or there's like master stylists. Or I don't know what the
Yeah.
what the names are, but
Different
different
life
yeah,
experience
so
or
different levels of
levels.
experience. So
Yeah.
how do you like adapt so everyone walks away from that one experience with at least
Right.
like a few different learnings?
Well, the first thing is I have to know who my audience is going to be in that level of experience. So I oftentimes will confirm the class with whoever the head of education is for the salon or for the school that I'm going to. If it's a school, they're all students. So honestly, I just kind of do the most simplest thing for them in layman terms because they don't understand everything. But in salons, I'm like, how many people will be attending and what's the level of experience that you have? Newbies, 1 to 3 years, 5 to 10 years, or 10 plus. And they'll tell me what it is, and then I can format from that. So I learned a long time ago, especially from my mentor, is how to properly lesson plan a classroom or a presentation with an open body close type method. And so I always build my classroom structures on that. I focus on 3 to 5 key points, and then I build those key points, the information they need to understand it, and then the information they need to execute it. The what's in the hows, basically. I start with why, fill in my what's in hows, and then we close and recap it. And the company I work for now, Wella Professionals, they also provide us with curriculum and formats to maybe the classes that they are sending us to teach if I'm doing it from them. And then I'll take that format and I can either customize it to fit the classroom or I can rebuild it in my way as long as I'm still presenting that information. If I'm doing freelance class, then I just do my own like lesson planning with that. So that's really how I find out who the audience is first, what level of experience. And then I have to remember the learning types. And there's 3 learning types, right? You have the people that are very visual, they have to see it. And then you have the people that are auditory. Those are the ones that need to hear it because they like to take notes. And then you have the kinesthetic people. They're ones like, I don't care. I just want to do it. They're all the hands-on people. So what I do is I make sure that my entire lesson plan or my seminar incorporates those three learning types into what we're doing. So I have to showcase something for them to see, give them the opportunity to do it. Even if it's not a hands-on class, it's just a look and learn.
Right.
I'll say, hey, who wants to come up here and try this? And then I have them come and try it, because you'll have people that want that because they're the ones that need the hands in it. They're the ones you'll find doodling while you're talking.
Right.
They're not listening. They are listening, they're just, this is their way to learn. And then those people that want to take notes. So you have to have information step by step. So sometimes I'll flip charts or PowerPoints, visual things for them. And that's how I really prep my class to make sure I can cover every basis. And then sometimes if you want to get really deep, then you have to understand the multiple intelligences. There's one person out there that was talking about it said they're 7. Another person says 9. I'm like, whatever, as long as like there's a rhythm, there's someone that's spatial or book smart or whatever, that we touch point a little bit in a way for all of these. Because you're right, just because the way I was taught or I learned this way doesn't mean everyone else is. It's like a love language, right?
Yeah.
It's like they often say we tend to love somebody the way we want to be loved, and then we get upset because they don't acknowledge that or appreciate it, because it's like that's not their love language. But it's like that. Just because I learn by doing doesn't mean the rest of them do. And so I have to make sure that I create a lesson plan that caters to all those learning types. Short answer, who's your audience? And then create a plan that caters to all those learning types, because you're going to have those in that classroom. And then be ready to pivot for when it doesn't go your way.
This podcast is called Learning Playground. It's because I really enjoy incorporating play within the experiences that I create. Even though like my audience is adults, or it's like the stigma of like, oh, adults don't like to play while they're learning. But the reality is, when you start throwing up
Right.
some like gamification elements like leaderboards, or building collecting points and these types of things over time, like adults start to get like at least maybe a short-term motivation related to that. But
Right.
anyway, either way, I find it to be fun just to incorporate play into education. So like, what are some ways that you think about doing that in your classroom?
I incorporate play. Some of the things that I do is I create learning centers for them. And so I already have like an organized flip chart, and I'll just put the large post-its around the room, and there'll be different learning centers. And then they'll go to each one and they get to like plug and play, whether it's like a matching game or testers or anything like that. Sometimes I'll do like some sort of game or bingo. One fun thing I like to do is take a beach ball and I write questions on there, and then we pop it to each other in a circle, and then wherever they catch it, whatever question it is, they have to answer it. And it's based about stuff that they learn. So we'll do that at the end because it's kind of memorable. So things like that. So I try to make it fun for them. So it's just not me talking at them, and they're actually interactive.
Thinking about your experience as an educator,
Mhm.
if you were to go into like my world and like a more like corporate setting, like creating educational experiences, or even just coming in as a facilitator of a workshop, what would you bring in from your environment to make sure that it went well?
What I would bring from my environment is making it personal. You get into their level and make sure that it's like, hey, regardless of what industry we're in, there's something to be learned by each other, and just meeting them where they're at. That's probably the biggest thing. If I'm learning, going to, like, say I go to a seminar from your industry or from you, I watch presenters more than anything, how they present, how they speak, words they use. And I'm like, ooh, I like that. That's a better way to say it. And then I put my spin on it, because obviously it's not going to be like a tech or a corporate type of thing.
Yeah.
And so we do that. Yeah.
Last question, and then I'm gonna let you get out of here. I feel like I've held you for a lot longer than
Yeah,
than I told you I would. But
we both talk. So it's
yeah,
good, yeah.
well, you talked like I'm pretty sure there's a way to measure. I'm gonna see
Words per minute.
80% of the talk time, so that's all right. That's okay. We'll just rename this Learning Playground with Zeb.
Yeah. Zeb's playground.
All right, thinking about like your entire educational history as a student, like what was the most memorable learning experience that you've ever encountered?
I don't even know if it was much of a learning experience as it was like just an aha moment, which I guess learning is. It's a good friend of mine now. He was actually a hairdresser with me at the salon I worked at. And I was like, man, I don't really like precision haircutting. I just want to go in there and create however I want and not follow any rules. And he said, I don't believe you can call yourself a true hair cutter if you don't understand precision haircutting, because that's all about fundamentals. And that stuck with me, man, because I'm like, dang, as much as I want to get creative and do all these things, the fundamentals is really what kickstarts that. And that was probably my biggest learning moment that I continue to take with me. And it was just from my teammate, who is now one of my good friends. Yeah.
That's like,
Shout out Ivis Hernandez.
I'm Ivis.
At Cuts by Ivis.
Shout out Ivis. All right.
Yeah.
No, but that's real though, because we were just talking about this last night. One of my kind of a philosophy that I follow is from Pablo Picasso. He had said, master the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, when they think about Picasso, they think about this like chaotic, cubism art, like very abstract.
Mhm.
But the reality is, when he was learning how to be a painter, he would actually paint more like Rembrandt style, like very like
Yeah.
precise, and they look real. So that resonates with me quite a bit. And so that's something that I try to teach even when I'm mentoring people. It's just like you need to master the fundamentals, but which will allow you to be
Yeah.
creative like an artist, right?
Yeah.
So
For sure.
that's cool. Well, Zeb, thank you so much for being
Yeah, bro.
first guest
Thanks for having
on
me,
the
man.
Learning Playground.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. I think like I picked you for a reason, because I've learned from you so much over the years, and it's been awesome just to kind of see what you've
Yeah.
done with your career. But yeah, maybe we'll
Appreciate it.
circle
Yeah.
back next season and have you
Let's
on.
do it. I'm
All right.
down. Let's do it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Catch us on Spotify, or you can get all the episodes at rickyratcliffe.com.